Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'm uploading a new video which will hopefully be a lot better quality than the video I uploaded yesterday. And today I'm going to be talking a bit about New World and how it's potentially a spiritual successor to Ultima Online, or at least to the classic heyday of Ultima Online during the late 1990s, early 2000s. I'd seen a lot of comments that there were quite a lot of similarities between Ultima Online and New World, but early on I hadn't really seen it myself or felt it myself, but the more I played New World and the more I thought about it, the more I saw the similarities, especially in core gameplay mechanics. And so I thought I'd take a look at the similarities and see just how much potential inspiration was taken from Ultima Online in the development of New World. So I suppose the first place to start is, what was Ultima Online? It was one of the early MMOs, one of the first big ones, launched way back in 1997, hit the massive number of 250,000 subscribers at one point. Small by today's comparisons, but back then was massive, and is still going today. It was a very difficult game to get into, in that you were thrown into the world with very little in terms of instruction, and had a very steep learning curve. Also, if you played the game in the early days, you had no ability to protect yourself from stronger players. Anywhere in the world, you could be attacked by other players, and the only sanctuary you would have is in one of the major cities, where you could call the guards to protect you. Other than this, you were at other players' mercy, and if they did kill you, they could take all of your gear. Now, if that sounds like absolute hell, at times it was, but it was also extremely exhilarating. There was nothing really to compare it to at the time, so it wasn't seen as such an issue as it would be today. But as more games came out and didn't have this element, it became more highlighted and eventually essentially removed by introducing two versions of the game world. Trammell, which was a safer version of the world where you could only engage in PvP through guild wars, and Felucia, which was the original game mechanics where you could still combat anyone you wanted to. In terms of your character progression, you had essentially a pot of skill points you'd be able to train skills in, but you could do that however you wanted. It was 700 skill points, I believe, and if you fought creatures using a sword, you'd gain sword mastery. If you used spells, you'd gain magery. If you used a bow and arrow, you'd gain archery, and so forth. And depending on what skills you would use, that would increase the core 3 attributes of strength, dexterity, and intelligence. So using a sword would increase your strength, using magic would increase your intelligence. And then you also had skills for resource gathering, mining, and lumberjacking are the only two that come to mind right now, but there might have been more. In terms of the reagents you needed to cast magic, I think you just picked them up off monsters and literally found them on the floor. But you were not limited in how you spent the points, so you could have 50 skill points in 14 different skills. Wouldn't get you very far, but you could do that if you wanted. You were able to buy and place homes in the open world, which led to player-run villages in many areas with lots of vendors, because you could place a vendor on the steps of your home, which created great elements in terms of player communities. There were dungeons within the game, although not in the same way we experience them in games these days. They weren't separate instances. You would literally just walk to the entrance of the dungeon, and it was part of the overall open world map, so you just walk in and start killing creatures, and hope you didn't find any player killers waiting for you in there. And all of this was back in the day of 56k dial-up modems, which meant anybody on a dedicated line would have a significant advantage over, say, a 15-year-old kid at home worried that their parents were going to pick up the phone at any point, which would disconnect you. So there are quite drastic differences between the two games, but you've probably noticed a few similarities from your own experiences playing New World. At their core, they're both sandbox MMOs, with similar leveling techniques in terms of how you would attribute stats to your characters, and that you're not locked into certain classes. You can set your character up however you want, in terms of you can go out all constitution and use any weapon, you can go out all focus, you can go mix of strength, intelligence. Whilst using any weapon, they may not be the most effective methods, but you can do whatever you want. Resource gathering and trade skills definitely have similarities, and player versus player combat in the open world definitely brings back memories of combating player killers in Ultima Online. There was organised PvP in Ultima Online a few years after it initially released, faction versus faction combat. I think there were 3 or 4 different factions, but there was no limitations in terms of numbers that could take part in that, so you'd just have zergs of players running around fighting over control of shrines. Similar to the PvP in terms of 50 versus 50 combat we see in New World, but obviously no limitations whilst it's limited to those numbers in New World. But the whole controlling town element of New World is something completely different to anything that ever existed in Ultima Online. I don't think there's anything similar to compare to in Ultima Online. One other small similarity that's just come to mind is the inventories. So the way it works in New World is that you can carry as much as you want so long as it's within a certain weight threshold, which is exactly how it worked in Ultima Online as well. That you, based on your strength, you could carry a certain weight, and that was it. If you hit your limit, you were over encumbered and you could only move very slowly, if at all. I don't think you're able to even recall. So there are a lot of key similarities between the two games, which might explain why I have enjoyed New World so much. I don't think I've found a game that I engage with quite as much in the same way as Ultima Online as I have in New World. Obviously the games look very different. You'll have seen in the background the gameplay of Ultima Online and New World. Ultima Online was isometric top-down view, and obviously very, very old style looking game. The gameplay you're seeing is from the Ultima Online Classic client. I managed to actually find my account details and log in and have a play around with that today. But whilst graphically they are worlds apart, the aesthetics of the two games are similar in terms of the time frame the games are taking their inspiration from. Ultima Online set in the completely mythical world of Caesarea, but it is based on a medieval background, much as New World is, in terms of we see Templars, Knights, the Syndicate, medieval weaponry, and yeah, they're aesthetically quite similar as well. So yes, whilst the games are different, I think there are enough similarities between the way the two games play to say that at least some inspiration was taken from the Ultima Online world or that style of game and brought into what New World is today, and is probably why I enjoy it so much. So yeah, if you were a fan of the original Ultima Online back in the late 90s, early 2000s, you might want to check New World when it comes out on the 28th of September, if you haven't already. And that is it for this video. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and please subscribe. I'll be trying to do more similar content in the future. But for now, have a great day. I'll see you soon.